Well, first of all, I want to tell you how sorry I am that I can't be at the ABA Animal Law Conference. I am so convinced that lawyers can do a great deal for animals, and because of so many laws being passed on a state level and a federal level, that the more awareness we can get is fabulous and important. My first film was with ravens and seagulls, and Alfred Hitchcock was an excellent director and was able to convince these animals to be absolutely horrifying, and which led me to a film career that ultimately led me to the continent of Africa. My then husband was a producer, and we decided to do a film about the animals in the wild. So we decided, let's use the big cat, the great cat. So we got back to California. The script was written using 28, 29, whatever animals, not necessarily all of them at once in one scene, but many times there were 15, 20 together. As soon as the trainers read the script, they said, "You can't do this movie." They literally laughed at us. And we said, "Well, why not?" And every one of them said, because of instinctual dictates to fight. They didn't want their animal hurt. They didn't want to be hurt. And so they suggested to us to get our own animals to do this. Well, okay, that was a good idea. The first one was a rescue. And then we heard about more cats that needed a home. The private citizen who had purchased an exotic cat and then was surprised by the fact that it kept growing and that it became very, very dangerous. Sometimes from an animal park, 12 lion would come in, and from older circus animals. But the common denominator was the private citizen who bought these animals as a pet. By the time we were finished, we had 150 animals that came to us because they needed a home. After the film was over, I formed the Roar Foundation because it is the national debt to keep these animals here. We have to raise $1 million. It's up to $1 million a year just to keep it going. Every animal here has a story, every one of them. We had a circus elephant who lived here. She came to us in 1978. She almost killed 2 trainers. She tore the tent down, and they, of course, were going to euthanize her. They called her a bad animal. Well, you incarcerate any being for doing absolutely nothing wrong, and they will retaliate. Eventually, they will retaliate. So we said, well, we'll take her. And they said, "You're crazy, she'll kill you." She was so happy. She was so happy the entire time she was here. Patrick, our beautiful liger, apparently was born in New York City, and he found his way to a place called Deer Park in Illinois. And the cage that he was in, he could take 3 steps one way and 3 steps the other way, and that was about it. There was a man in Colton, California. His name was John Weinhardt. And he had a place that he had the nerve to call Tiger Rescue. There were 90 big cats, lion, tiger, leopard. He was breeding, and he wasn't feeding them enough. He'd give them he'd throw some roadkill in every now and then. The mothers were so undernourished that the cubs wouldn't survive. How they came to term, I don't even know. But they'd see them nursing and think they were fine. Well, they would be dying because the mother didn't have any milk. They found 58 tiger cubs, infant tiger cubs, in a freezer. They found tigers with their arms tied together, their forearms tied together. The fact that these animals are living in conditions that are absolutely under standard by any means. And they are that way because most of the states have no laws, or they don't have stringent laws, or there are no inspectors. I mean, there's not a really good reason to breed these animals to be sold as a pet. I was asked to go to Michigan to help them, they were trying to make their laws stronger. They not only had the problem of the big cat breeding and the dangers of that, but also the hybrid wolf, who is another very, very dangerous animal. And so I went to talk to them, and I took their bill, even though it was a state bill. I took it to Washington and said, can we make this into a federal bill? And we did. But Larry Combest, who was the congressman, who was head of the committee, was from Texas. And he said, this isn't good for the state of Texas, which has more breeders. They have more lions living in people's backyards than exist, more tigers living in people's backyards than exist in the country of India. That bill was just shelved. And it was probably, sometimes there are no accidents. And that was probably okay. Because what it did was it gave Congress a little bit of a taste of what's going on out there in the animal community. The animal business, dead or alive, is so huge that it's just under illegal drugs. So when I asked my own congressman, Buck McKeon, to introduce the Captive Wildlife Safety Act in the year 2003, we started in 2002, but it was through 2003 before it got, was introduced. And that bill simply stops the interstate traffic of these animals as pets. So what it does is stops the breeders from shipping their animals out, their little cubs out of state. It stops the interstate traffic of the auction sales and of the canned hunts. Now, the canned hunt is one of the most appalling things, I think, that our country is allowing. The canned hunt is a facility that will take in exotic animals, and for anywhere from 3 to 20,000, whatever you're sucker enough to pay, you can blow the lights out of that animal with the weapon of your choice. It is a guaranteed trophy. The bill that I'm working on now is the federal ban on the breeding of the exotic feline for personal possession. And that, I searched hard for that phrasing, personal possession. I could ask your audience, who of you think that this would be a good pet? Would you allow your child to sit next to this animal? Would you let him be around him all the time, knowing how fast they move, how quickly those instincts come into place, and how deadly they could be? And on the other hand, they are magnificent beyond belief. They have a great capacity for love. They have a sense of humor. They have their inferiority complexes, their dominancy problems. And yet in a split second, it's like you putting a loaded pistol on your coffee table. Maybe nobody will pick it up. Would you take the chance? Oh, my message to the audience is, if you hear about anybody who wants a wild animal, I don't care if it's a little squirrel in your backyard or a Siberian tiger, don't touch it. Don't do it. There is not one thing that we can give a wild animal that they need. Not one thing.